Hey everybody, you're watching Cad Roll Hunter. I am super excited. I've been going through this huge collection that I just purchased, and today we're finally going to go through all of these pennies, and there are some oldies. This looks to all be Elizabeth laureate portrait. I got a bag of King George VI, and I got a binder full of oldies going back to King George V. This is going to be awesome. Oh, not to mention this huge thing of oldies all flipped up. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, this is James and you're watching my channel Cad Roll Hunter. If you've been watching the channel lately, you know I bought this huge collection from Tristan. It belonged to his dad, Edgar, and Edgar had passed away a couple of years ago, and the family was going through and found this huge stash of coins we've been going through. They wanted them to go to a good home and somebody who might enjoy them, and I think I'm going to enjoy this. These are mostly circulated coins. Edgar, as a collector, was basically getting his pocket change, going through it, and threw anything old and interesting in a jar. And that's really how all of this came about. So he wasn't buying these at coin shops. He wasn't buying coin collections. He wasn't doing anything like that. He was separating out the coins that he found interesting and old. And we're going to go through what I'm hoping we might find is that there might be some varieties. Maybe we could find a 1953 shoulder fold. Maybe it's a 1949 8 identical. There could be something really cool. There's 4 rolls in here that all say 1967 cents. If that's the case, what we don't know is, are they circulated, uncirculated, and a couple of them actually are not marked, so they could be something different, but maybe there's some varieties in there. What I got to do is clear all this out here and try to figure out where to start. I think this looks like it's unsorted stuff. There's some newer stuff in here. There's some Americans. I think that Tristan and his sister had tried to help organize their dad's collection by flipping some of them up. I think Tristan might have even tried to separate some of them out. So I think some of this stuff was separated out maybe even by Tristan, not necessarily by Edgar. But that's okay. We're going to go through and we're going to take stock of what we got, see if there's some oldies, see if we got some varieties. This is so fun. I expect that Edgar wasn't scoping coins. So if there are any minor varieties in here, he probably wouldn't have been aware of that. And you never know, maybe there's some goodies in here. There's a little tin of newer stuff. So we've just got to figure out where to start. I think maybe what we'll do is we'll start with this binder, and I'll take the stuff out of the binder. We'll see. I think there's going to be some old stuff in there. I'll clear this stuff off to the side for now. I think when they were looking through some of the flips, they were trying to find the oldest stuff and put it in here. So that might be the good place to start. And this is definitely the old stuff. This is actually all King George V. We've got 1920, 29, 28, 32. So we don't have the key dates, it doesn't look like, but into the 30s. So I'll get this out of here first. I got those pennies out of the album, and we've already got our first surprise because one of these pennies is not actually a penny. And you can barely tell, but this here, it's so tarnished, but this is a Canadian dime from 1920. So this is King George V, and don't apologize if you can't see anything on it. It is so dark, it probably looked just like a penny. I'll throw it under the scope to see if we can even make it out. And it's going to be really hard. You could probably just see the date 1920, and you might barely make out 10. If I flip it over, you can probably make out King George V. It is heavily circulated, heavily corroded, heavily damaged, but it's a silver 10-cent coin. So I'll set that aside. That's pretty cool. Where we didn't get any surprises, of course, is in the pennies. We got 1920, some 1928s here, 29s. We didn't get anything between 1920 and 1928. 1921, 1927, those are better dates. But the 23, the 25, those would be key dates. 22, that's a tough one. All of those would be actually worth a fair bit, even in a circulated condition. So they were much harder to come by. I'm not surprised that we don't have them here. But then we get 29, 32, 33, 34, 35, and 136. Now, a great surprise would be if we got a 1936 dot. That is a fabled Canadian coin. There's really only a few on record. It would be worth a few $100,000, I'm sure. I'll throw that under the scope because, you never know. But unfortunately, there's definitely no dot there. So, well, I can't complain. We got some King George V here in these flips. These are some really, really old Canadian coins. That's pretty awesome. And a silver to boot. Maybe what we'd better do next is see what is in here. These ones, I think they flipped up. I don't know if there's any more King George V. Perhaps not, if they all got separated out and put in the binder. But what I'll do is dump these bad boys out and we'll try to start to see what we've got. Even if it's just common circulated 40s and 50s, we may still have some varieties that we want to check for. So I'll get these guys out. Holy cow, this is a sight to behold. Check out all of these pennies in flips. That is just crazy. They're spilling over the side of the desk here. And most of them, it looks like, are labeled with the date. So 1946, 1941. So most of these look to be just regular circulated coins from the 40s, the 50s. There might be some 30s in here, hopefully. Oh, there's a nice little surprise. This one is a Newfoundland from 1943. So I'll set aside any of those, but I'm going to sort these out by year. We'll see if there are any that we'll want to check later once we've gone through the loose stuff for any of the errors or varieties that we might be aware of. So I got a little bit of work to do to get these sorted out by year to make some sense of what we got here. This is pretty awesome, lots of fun. I might be somewhere close to about getting halfway through these flips, but check this out. We got stacks of flips here. I found another King George V that was in the pile, but 37, 38, 39. We've got every year in the 40s, including the 48s and 49s. That's a key year we want to look for some of those varieties, the identicals and where the A is pointing and all that such thing. 50, 51, 52. So far, everything here has been King George VI. There's also another bag of King George VI I'll want to get to. And I suspect that the family might have been taking it upon themselves to go through, sort out, and flip up the King George VI and might have run out of flips because there are no empty penny flips in here. So I kind of figured that might be the case because there is a bag of more King George VI. I think there's also a big bucket of coins that hasn't even been sorted. That's probably going to be a separate video because that's a whole search on its own. But I'm going to keep going through these. I may not keep these in the flips. These are not high-grade coins. They're pretty circulated examples. I usually tube these up or roll them up. It's probably what I'm going to do. I'll probably do my best to save any of these flips that only have like one staple in it so that I'm not being wasteful. But for now, I'm just going to stack them up here. We'll get a sense. So I'll finish this up and then we'll see where we are here. All right, here they are all stacked up, and that right there is 1939, and I think that might be the highest stack. So that's a bit surprising because it would be one of the harder years to come by. But obviously, Edgar was taking anything in the 30s, 39, 38, only a few 37s there, but a lot of ones in the 40s here. I think what I got to do is get them out of the flips. I'll line them up on the board here, and then I can go through the bag of King George VI coins to see what we can add to this big stack. So I've got all of these out of their flips, and trust me, it took way longer than you expect it might have taken for me to do that. I got a couple little injuries from some wayward staples, and some of them are a little hard to pry apart, but this is what we've got, basically starting the 20s. The next row up, there's the 30s, leading all the way up to our biggest pile, which are these 1939s for sure. And then we've got every year in the 40s, and then we've got up to 52. That's last year of King George VI. So everything in those flips was King George VI or King George V. So that is really, really awesome. Now, what else we have here is this Crown Royal bag that I think is all full of King George VI. So I don't know if these were just ones they ran out of flips or what had happened. If it's just later dates or earlier dates or what, I don't know. I have to say this does remind me of being a kid because while I wasn't a heavy Crown Royal drinker when I was in elementary school, I certainly had one of these bags because this is what we kept our marbles in that we toted around the schoolyard. I don't recall any teachers ever giving us trouble for having alcohol bags on campus or on the schoolyard. But in any case, I'm going to dump this out. We're going to see what is in here. I'm going to try not to knock over my piles. Maybe I'm going to do it over here and just see. So there's a whole lot, including one in a baggie, a couple in a baggie. I'm going to have to take a peek in the light and see what those are. Oh, 1937. So first year King George VI stapled up in little bags. But the rest here, oh, and there's a 2001. I probably think that wasn't supposed to be in there, but it does look like the rest of these are King George VI. So I'm going to start sorting them out. And if I find anything interesting along the way, I'll let you know. Otherwise, I'm going to add them to our growing piles here. Almost done sorting through that bag. I've put them all out just in the front here. And we got lots of great stuff. A whole bunch of 1948s and some 1949s there, which is good because we can look for those varieties in that year. But there are a couple that I want to show you. One, speaking of 1948, this one still has a bit of luster on it and lots of detail in the hair. It is better than average for certain for 1948. Again, we can check for the variety. And there were a couple Queen Elizabeths in here, including this really nice looking 1964. A couple spots, but for the most part, a pretty nice looking coin. I decided to tally these up and it's pretty crazy. We got 7 King George V in the 20s. We got 19 King George V in the 30s. We got 70 King George VI in the 30s. We got 301 from the 40s. And we got 142 King George VI in the 50s. That is a crazy, incredible tally. And there's probably more because we've got all these things to go through. And there is still the Queen Elizabeth ones and a bunch of loose stuff. I have no idea what's there. But we got tons of stuff. Before I tube them up, we're going to check particularly the 48s and 49s. Here's that 1948. And this might well be a upgrade in my own collection. It is beautiful. It's mostly uncirculated. It's still got some mint luster. The fields are gorgeous. There's tons of detail in the hair. It's really got nowhere. The 3 varieties that we're looking for, there is an A in Gratia pointing to a large denticle. That's what we have here. This is a common variety. It would have been really cool if we got the scarce variety. The other one that is common is A pointing between large denticles. The one we're looking for is an A pointing to a small denticle. In a VF20, that's a $10 coin. If we can find some even in these circulated conditions, that'd be a great little find. So I'm going to pull those out. I'm going to look through them. If I find one, I'll bring you in. So we had over 40 1948s to pick from. This is the one I showed you, the A pointing to large denticle. And we did find one variety here. And this is the A pointing to small denticle. You can see these are more like small little lines. This coin is in pretty terrible shape. It's not in great shape whatsoever, but it is an A pointing to small denticle. So I'm going to flip that up and we're going to hold on to that one because that is a very hard to find one for sure. Here's the standard 1949. We've got an A pointing between 2 denticles. We're looking for the A that is pointing to a denticle, and it'll be very obvious when we see it. It's going to be pointing straight up right to a denticle. So we had 18 of those to check, and all of them were the common variety. We didn't get the scarce one. Okay, I'm going to clear these all away and make space for the laureate portraits. So I almost completely forgot. There is another variety we can look for because we've got 3 1929s, and the 1929 has 2 varieties. There's a low 9 and a high 9, or some say a normal 9 and a high 9. This is the first of the 3. This is what is known as the normal or low 9, and you can see the base of that 9 here is basically well below the 2, but the top of the 2 and the top of the 9 are about the same. We want to see if we can find the high 9 where the top of the 9 is above the 2. So it's not that one. That is also the regular one. And that's probably what we're going to get here. And that, I'm going to have to look again. There is the low 9. That bottom of the 9 is pretty much lower. But this one here, we've got the high 9. Check out this 9 is higher than that 2. And the base is more in line with the 2. So we got the 1929 variety. We got the high 9. If you look in the Charlton catalog here, you can see that in a VG8 state, it's a $20 coin versus a 1929 50-cent coin. And we got that here. And I know that Tristan is watching along and had his fingers crossed hoping we would find a gem or two. And I think we found a gem here. We got a 1929 high 9 King George King George V. A little bit of damage on the crown, but we can see the full band of the crown. We can see the jewels. So this might be more like a VG or fine almost, and that is a wicked find. 1929 high 9. Now I'll clear this stuff off and we'll look at the rest, and hopefully we'll find a gem in there too. Okay, I'm going to move on to these ones. These all look like they're laureate portrait. These look to be mixed. Of course, these rules for sure. We'll figure that out. And this all looks to be circulated 1967s. I'll want to check later for the DDO. But I just got to start sorting these. So I'm going to do that first. Then we'll check for any varieties in here. Everything looks pretty circulated. We'll get a sense of what we got. And I'll bring you in if there's anything interesting as I'm sorting this stuff out. Otherwise, I'll bring you back when it's all organized. So here are all of the laureate portraits that were in that tin. I just thought I'd take a moment before I go to the rest of the coins just to mention that when you lay them out by year, it really does give you an idea of how common or how prevalent some years are over others. So in the back here, I've got 60, 61, 62, 63, 64. Clearly more 63s and 64s, 64 being the most common. Over here, this is 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, and 59. So 58, relatively speaking, is the most scarce of all of them. 55 is harder to come by, and 53. So just shows you that some are much more common. So if we're coin roll hunting, we'd expect to find 64s and 63s far more often than a 53, which is my experience. Of the best coins here, there's a 54 that has a little bit of red on it. And then the nicest one, really the only one that appeared uncirculated, was this 1963. Here, I'll set that aside. Everything else is pretty circulated. So I'm going to get into the rest of the rolls, sort them out here, and then we'll look at the varieties we can find. I've just dumped those loose pennies on the mat here. I'm going through them. Anything that's copper is going in the copper cup. I'll separate it to steel and zinc. I'll look for errors. A couple of finds here to show you. One is a really nice looking 1981. So I'll set that one aside. And then I just came across this guy. This is a real oldie. This is a wheat cent here, and I think it's 1917. We'll throw that up under the scope just to confirm. Yeah, that's a 1917 Philadelphia. Pretty circulated, but that's an oldie. Awesome. Here is something I'm always looking for. This is a 1965, and it's the pointed 5. This 5 really comes close to the stalk or the twig on that maple leaf. The one you really want to find is the large beads, and you got to flip it over and look at the motto, Regina. This one's in pretty rough shape. The large bead, that A in Regina, is going to point to the large bead. So this one here is the pointed 5 small bead. That's cool. I'm going to hold on to it because I very rarely find the pointed 5s. So we'll set that aside. Speaking of pointed 5s, in this bundle or in this bag, there are a whole bunch of 1985s. Almost all of the coins from the 80s like this with the 12 sides are 1985. I've been checking all of them to see if we've got the pointed 5 or the blunt 5. This is the blunt 5. It's straight up and down. But I'm feeling pretty good because there's so many 1985s, like almost exclusively 1985s. I kind of wonder if Edgar knew there was something special about 85 or if that year had meaning to him and pulled them all aside. In any case, it gives us a really good opportunity perhaps to get a pointed 5, so fingers crossed. Well, here's a penny that's not a penny. At least it's not a Canadian penny. This one is a British penny from 1971. 1 penny. You can see that it's a little bit bigger than the rest. It's actually quite a bit bigger. It's probably closer to the size of a nickel, but looks a lot like the penny, and that portrait is the same portrait as on the Canadian stuff. So that's a cool find too. I've been scoping all these 1985s and I came across something curious. Here is a blunt 5, and you'll see the top of that 5 is almost completely straight up and down. The other thing I want you to look at is the point here. This comes to a point. And here's the listing in the Charlton catalog. So you can see on the left, that's what we've seen, the blunt 5. And on the right is the pointed 5. And of course, if you look at this part of the 5, it actually is cut across the side there. So it looks a little bit different. It's not the only difference. And the top of the 5 is actually thinner, if you see that. But I want to show you a couple that I've just found. So there's the blunt 5 I just showed. And then take a peek at this guy here. So I found this one, and it certainly looks to be the blunt 5. It does come to a point here, but it's very definitely on an angle. I was just about to chalk that up to some kind of damage, and I just found another one. And I'll pull this across and take a look at this one. It also comes on a bit of an angle, but it is pointed here. It's still pretty thick at the top. Let me know what you think. Have we found a third variety? Or are both of these just slightly damaged, making them appear to have a bit of a slant when they don't? And again, here is what the blunt 5 normally looks like, pretty straight up and down. But both of these ones have a very definite slant to them. I'll set them aside. I'm not convinced that they're the pointed 5. They're certainly not the ones that I have found in the past. And it could just be the eyes playing tricks. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Here's a bright and shiny 1979. This is going to be the double 979. There is doubling all along the side of this 9. The base of that 7 along the side, and at the base of the 9, it's really prominent. That is from die deterioration. It's not a double die, but this one is good in that it's got a lot of eye appeal. You can even see this definitely on ones that are more circulated, but this is a pretty good example here with some bright, shiny mint luster. Found another grungy old wheat cent, but it's an oldie. It is a 1923 Philadelphia. Actually has a fair amount of detail, but it's got some definite environmental damage too. Here's another grungy one. It's a steely. You can barely make it out, but it's a 1943. There's no mint mark, so it's from Philadelphia, but it's definitely been perhaps in a hole in the ground. It's got lots of environmental damage and rust. All right, before we go any further, just got to settle this. I've taken a long look at these 1985s, and I've determined that these are not new varieties, that these are really just damaged. So here is a typical 1985. Here is the first 1985 that I found here. And I think what's happened is that this part has just been flattened down a little bit. There's actually a little depression on the corner, which I think has just pushed the metal and made it appear as though it is pointed. And you can see the metal actually got pushed up a bit and out a bit to make it look like a point. So that's not a new variety. And this one here as well, same thing. It just got pushed in the same spot. It's pushed it up and over. It looks interesting, but it doesn't really have the markers of the pointed 5. So we put that one to rest. So the varieties we're going to look for are going to be the 1953 shoulder fold, the 1954 no shoulder fold, which would be very unlikely because it was only actually produced, I think, in proof-like sets. The 1955 no shoulder fold, which would be exceptionally rare. Then we're going to look for the 1962 guitar or harp. And otherwise, oh, and the 1964, there's an extra spine we're going to look for on here. The other years that don't have any varieties, I'm just going to roll these up. All of my copper coins in the laureate portrait years, King George VI, I roll up by year. So I'll do that and get them off the mat here. Then we're going to take a peek and see if we've got any of those varieties. Fingers crossed. Starting with the 1953s, this is the no shoulder fold. This is the common version. We're going to be really hard pressed to find the shoulder fold on any shoulder fold varieties because they're all quite circulated. The easiest thing is to look at the font here, and particularly the eye. You can see it's got a very flared end there. We're going to look for the no shoulder fold, which is the harder to find variety that's got a pretty slim eye. And we're just going to do that real quickly together here. And that's the no shoulder fold. And that's probably what we would expect for most of them. And you can see how flared that is. If we get the shoulder fold variety, we will see it right away. It'll be pretty, oh, look at that. I believe we've got a shoulder fold. I'm going to pull that one aside. We'll compare it again in a moment. No shoulder fold, no shoulder fold. Well, that's pretty exciting already that we got a variety. And I'm glad I was able to bring you along to see that, because it looks like all the rest are likely to be the no shoulder fold. And they are, so we'll just take a look at the difference here between these two, and you can see particularly at the very top of this eye how slim it is and how flared it is there. Same thing at the bottom. So we got one. If we look down, we can sort of maybe not really see the shoulder fold, but we got it. We got a 1953 shoulder fold, and that is a cool one. It's very circulated, but this is a harder one to get. And of course we had about 15 of them to scope or so, and we just had one of these. So you'll want to check for that variety for sure. So nothing doing on the 1954s and 1955s as expected. They were all the shoulder fold, the common variety. What we're looking for in the 1962s here is a die variety called the guitar or harp, basically just different variations of an anomaly where there are lines coming down from the one. I'll put an illustration up here so you can see what that looks like. I've got a bunch of 1962s to go through. I'll check through all of them. If we find one, I'll bring you back. Otherwise, we'll move on to the 1964 extra spine. So no guitar or harp in those 1962s, but it is a variety I found a couple of times. They all looked like this, the ones we had here, but you'll want to look because they are out there and it's an interesting variety that collectors value. So 1964s, we are looking for the extra spine. Basically, this little bud on the maple leaf, there's a little extra piece of metal that we would see. Again, I'll try to put an illustration up so you can see what I'm looking for. I got a whole bunch of 1964s. They're all circulated, so it's going to make our job a little tougher. It's definitely easier to see if they are in closer to a mint state with lots of brilliance, but we're going to do our best and see if we can find one because it's an interesting variety. Well, we got lucky in our very first stack. We got one, it's the extra spine, it's right there. It's little, it's hard to see on this one. We'll keep looking to see if we get any more and maybe hopefully in a better example where it's easier to see, but that's the extra spine, that's really cool. Last up are these 4 rolls here. 2 of them are labeled 1967 cents. The other 2 are not labeled. What we're hoping to see, would it be possible that these are uncirculated? Doesn't seem likely based on everything else we've got in the collection here, but we don't know sort of how these came to be in the collection or what the deal is. So we're going to start with this guy right here, I guess, and we're going to find out together if they are all uncirculated. That's going to make it easier to see any varieties, but we'll find out here. I guess we'll just do this and see what we got. And I'm going to have to undo the end, or at least get it started so that this can open up as we unroll, because it's pretty tight. It seems like it's been wrapped up for a very long time. So I see some shiny edges, but this does not look to be uncirculated. And we'll take one out of the end here, and it most certainly is a 1967. So I'm going to start to scope these and see if we find anything in this particular roll, and if there are any better than average examples, there appears to be a couple in here. That's pretty nice looking coin, but they're not all like this for sure. So I'm through 2 of those rolls, the ones that were marked, and I got a short stack of ones that are more bright and shiny, an even shorter stack that have doubling on the date, but aren't the DDO. And I just opened the first of these 2 unmarked rolls, and they are also the 1967, and again, also mostly circulated. So I'll continue on. I'm expecting that last one is the same to see if we've got any of the DDO or anything interesting. And here I thought I'd gotten through everything, but I forgot about this second velvet bag here, and there's a whole bunch more, and they look to all be circulated brown 1967. So of course, I got to scope every single one of them and see if we might have that DDO. When I'm done, it might take me a while. I'll be right back. So of all those 1967s, we did get a stack here that are better than average, closer to being uncirculated. Some red, maybe some red brown, but those are the nicer ones. We did get a big stack of the double dates. That's that die deterioration. Some are nicer than others. The one that I think exhibits the most doubling here, or the most pronounced doubling, is this one here. So you can see that all along the numbers there. So that's pretty cool. That's what you want to look for. It's not a double die, it's just die deterioration, but sometimes it can be really, really significant, and even quite a bit more than this even. So if you find one, you can find them in a mint state that look really, really deteriorated like that with all that doubling. It's really, really cool. And then as for the doubled die obverse, I think we lucked out and we found one. This here is pretty circulated, but I'll throw it under the scope. And what we're looking at is DG Regina, and what you can see here is that we've got some of that doubling here on that serif, and you can see the doubling around these letters. Here's the Coins in Canada website, just highlighting what you're looking for. Really, you're looking for that double serif, the split right there, and some of the spread across the letters here. And we've got it. Not a great looking example necessarily, but it's really cool. It's a DDO. And I've got a bunch from another hunt that I did years ago where I found 2 full rolls of uncirculated 1967s, including a whole bunch that had doubling on both the obverse, that would be the DDO, and the reverse. Well, we found tons of stuff, and what I do with all of my circulated coins is I put them in tubes, all of my small sets. We got tons right from 1920 all the way to 1964, so that's what I do with all of my King George V, King George VI, and Queen Elizabeth II laureate portraits. I separate them out by years, and I fill these tubes. Once I get a full tube, you can see here's one that's almost full. I just roll them up like this and label them. And we got so many. I got a full roll of 38s and 39s today, 40, 43, 46, and so on and so forth. So I will hold on to all of these. All of the later years after 64, I just put them in the copper bucket for now. And so they are loose, just hoarding copper. But we found lots of other cool stuff. I pulled aside a 1954 that still has a bit of red on it. I suspect this could be an upgrade to my own collection. I just rarely find the early 50s with any kind of luster, so that was cool. Got a few other really nice ones here. We got a 1963, a 1979, and a 1981. This 1979, throw that one under the scope because it also has some doubling. So that's great. That's the double 979 we saw earlier, but it's in overall nice shape. We got a low mint 2005P set aside, and a 1962 here. I want to show you this. One of the things that we weren't particularly looking for in this hunt is the die clash. This is the hanging two. This is an impression of the Queen's neck on the other side of the coin here from the two dies clashing. We just had so few red examples. When they get really circulated and really worn and brown, it's really hard to see that. So we didn't really get many choices or chances, that is. But we did find one, so that's good. But we did get some other cool stuff too. We got that 1943C Newfoundland coin. That was a nice surprise. And we got some varieties. It always pays to scope and look closely. We got the 1948 A to small denticle, the 1948 A to large denticle, a 1953 shoulder fold, a 1964 extra spine, that 1965 pointed 5 small beads. We even got some silver. We got this 1920 dime, and it kind of looked like a penny. And I think our best find of the entire hunt was this 1929 high 9. This is one that I've been looking for, but get so few opportunities to find because King George V coins are not that plentiful. But there is the 9 sitting just a little bit higher than the 2 rather than lower than the 2. And that is pretty awesome. Well, I hope you enjoyed this probably pretty long video on Canadian pennies. We got the chance to look at, in detail, tons of pennies from this collection, and I'm really grateful for that. I'm also grateful for you for watching these videos. I'm glad you're doing that. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you're enjoying them. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, Cateroll Hunter, hit the subscribe button so you'll be notified when all of my new videos are coming out. I have videos coming out all the time. Sometimes they're looking through old coins like this. Sometimes it's coin roll hunting, rolls from the bank. Anything with regards to coins I'm interested in, I might just share it with you. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next time. The sponsors of today's video are Lighthouse Canada and the Charlton Press. Lighthouse Canada is the leading supplier of high-quality numismatic supplies in Canada, and the Charlton Press is the leading publisher of coin and paper money catalogs and price guides for Canadian collectors. Go check out their online stores today and use the exclusive discount code CRH20 for 20% off all your purchases.